Hey folks, I'm Athicus, and today I would like to help you out by explaining some of the terms that players new to the Warhammer 40k setting are bombarded with during the prologue and starting missions of Space Marine 2. Warhammer 40k is a vast, vibrant, decades-old setting that is filled with as many characters and storylines as there are stars in the galaxy. Space Marine 2 doesn't spare much time for the inductee either, as you are thrown right into the deep end with no explanation of what is going on around you. You poor summer child. So, let's see if we can get you settled a bit better, shall we? Onward. The Deathwatch and Titus's Heresy.
I must get back to the Watch Fortress.
You have been reassigned.
My place is with the Deathwatch.
The Inquisition can find no stain on you. Titus, accused of heresy. You have served penance in the Deathwatch for almost a century, and not once have you faltered.
We'll start off with why we first encounter Titus wearing black armor, when for the rest of the time you see him, he's in the blue of the Ultramarines chapter. Also, not called the Ultramarines chapter because they're in blue, but that's another thing. Without getting too deep, most humans in the galaxy live under the governance of something called the Imperium of Man. The Imperium is a theocracy that worships their leader, the Emperor, as a god. The Imperium has a lot of enemies, especially from an alternate dimension called the Warp. The Warp is filled with beings who serve a metaphysical force called Chaos. Now, this warp and the beings within it resonate psychically with human emotions, especially the big feelings like, hate, lust, greed, or despair. These beings hate the Emperor and all his works for some very specific but very complicated reasons, and they're always on the lookout for opportunities to kick sand in his eyes and steal his toys. It's kind of a Grinch who stole Christmas situation, where the Grinch is a tentacled, extra-dimensional being that gets off in your internet history, and Christmas is a cruel, dystopian regime that people only support since the other options are death or eternal torture. Anyway, consorting with these beings from the Warp is a big no-no for anyone in the Imperium, since the Chaos worshippers hate our lovely, very good, and bestest best Emperor. Working for Chaos is also usually a death sentence. Titus was suspected, for complicated reasons from the first Space Marine game, of being a dirty Chaos sympathizer, and he was in big trouble. A Space Marine is an expensive and challenging bit of bioengineering to make, though. So, rather than just execute him out of hand, because, fascist theocracy, they decided to lend him to the tender care of the Emperor's Inquisition. Can't have a dictatorship without a bunch of nasty people who ask questions using sharp, hot tools, right? Right. After answering the Inquisition's questions in some horrible oubliette for an unspecified amount of time, Titus was sentenced to serve the Inquisition in their super secret kill team called the Deathwatch. Normally, for Space Marines, working for the Inquisition as a member of the Deathwatch is an honor. They are also allowed to show the symbol of their chapter on their shoulder pad, but must paint their armor black. It's kind of funny. Working for people who in almost any other setting would be mustache-twirling villains is a mark of distinction in the 42nd millennium, apparently. The Inquisition suspects that Titus is still a dirty little emperor-hating, chaos-loving wrongin', though, so he serves instead as a Blackshield. Being a Blackshield means that the Marine in question is severed from all former association with his chapter and is disgraced permanently. They are also forbidden from showing their former chapter symbol on their shoulder too. This is why Titus, in the prologue, was always shown with a bit of cloth over his right pauldron. He's a Blackshield. He can't show the Ultramarines symbol. This should go some way, then, to explain why when Gadriel asks him about his service in the Deathwatch, Titus has nothing to say about it at all, and ignores him. This is also why Captain Acheron holds Titus's past over him. Heresy in the Imperium is pretty much the most serious crime possible. Once Titus gets perforated, though, he's brought back to life via a very complicated bit of surgical work called Rubicon surgery, which I'll talk about in a little bit. He didn't show himself to be a disgusting, alien-loving heretic though, so he's allowed to rejoin the Ultramarines, which is good for them, since big doings are afoot and they need all hands on deck, especially a veteran with over 200 years of service. Just in case though, in case he's still a bad boy emperor-hating heretic, this charming skull-faced fellow called a Chaplain will be keeping a close eye on Titus. A Chaplain's job is watching for, you guessed it, Heresy. Primaris Marines. Within the first hour of the game, you're given multiple mentions of Primaris Marine surgery, being born as a Primaris Marine, and I certainly didn't help matters by talking about Space Marines if every normal person knows what they are. So this is probably a good time to tell you about that. I mean, it's right there in the title with zero explanation. A Space Marine is not just a sort of hulking gorilla that wears very clunky looking armor and uses unreasonably large guns to turn their enemies inside out, like some other franchises. A Warhammer 40k Space Marine is a human taken as a child and subjected to all sorts of trials and torments to prove that they have the endurance, mental strength, and frankly luck to be able to survive the induction process. Once that's done, they are jam-packed with all kinds of cool organs that allow them to do things like drink poison or eat their enemies' brains to gain their knowledge, in addition to being super strong, super fast, and so forth. Space Marines also come, currently, in two flavors, Principia and Primaris, and are confusingly referred to, without making any distinction between the two, as Adeptus Astartes. Principia are the original sort of Space Marines designed by the Emperor and have been used throughout the entirety of the Imperium's existence, which is just a casual, 10,000 years or so. Primaris are something new, an evolution and continuation of the Emperor's research. They're taller, stronger, and much more resilient than the already terrifyingly powerful Principia Space Marines. When you start off the game with Titus as a Blackshield in the Deathwatch, which you now understand about, you are a Principia Space Marine. You're able to wade through swathes of angry alien bugs without batting an eye, until a big nasty one called a Carnifex skewers you and then holds you up to enjoy your torment. Wholesome. Now comes the next bit, and this is the part that lets Titus out of the Deathwatch and back into his cozy home of murderous space eunuchs called the Ultramarines. When a Marine is catastrophically hurt, but not outright killed, in quotation marks, they fall into a very special kind of coma, from which it may be possible to revive them, even though any other sane and reasonable life form would probably say, this whole living thing, I'm kind of done with it. I'll just stay dead, please. Not Titus, though. Titus would have been in this coma, and the Primaris surgery would have been used to upgrade him. All they had to do was, essentially tear out all of his organs, circulatory system, and nerves, stuff in a whole bunch of new things, including something called a Belisarian furnace, and sew him back up. This Belisarian furnace is important, since it can essentially heal even the most traumatic wounds, like being skewered by a Carnifex, assuming that the owner of said organ isn't being dissolved in acid or consumed to fulfill the dietary requirements of a Tyranid hive beast. The Adeptus Mechanicus. So now you've been face to face with all kinds of monsters, transhumans, and baseline humans. You know all about the Deathwatch, you know all about the Inquisition, you know all about Primaris and Principia Marines. But what about these charming fellows?
Archmakers, for the last time, we must get you off-world!
Assessment equals inordinate ignorance.
We'll be overrun in minutes!
By the Omnissiah, cease interruptions.
Remember when I told you that the citizens of the Empire worship the Emperor? So that's true, except it's not. There is a faction, a not inconsiderably sized faction, called the Adeptus Mechanicus, that is essentially the science and engineering side of the Imperium. They refer to themselves as tech priests, since by this time in the future, no one remembers how anything works anymore, and people who can do things like turn a computer on and off are basically miracle workers. Anyway, these tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus worship a machine god, not the Emperor exactly. They call the Omnissiah. Now, normally this would be heresy in all capitals, and it would be a bullet in the back of the head for them. Except, if you kill everyone who knows how to make the spaceships fly, the tanks shoot, and the water free of poop, pretty soon you're reduced to sticks and stones to fight with, as well as crippling diarrhea. In an almost unique display of sense between the two factions, the tech priests, and believe me when I say I am paraphrasing heavily here, the tech priests agreed to worship the Emperor as the Omnissiah, thus creating a sort of middle ground for the two religions to exist in. Now, thanks to that agreement, we have tech priests like Magos Gallio and Archmagos Nozick, shaking holy machine oils over the computers, keeping our ships in the air, and ordering us to our certain dooms to collect their research notes. That's a good use of a space marine. One more charming thing that these tech priests do is perform lobotomies on people deemed too criminal or simply too useless to serve as a normal citizen in the Imperium.
Scanning probes. 67 faults detected.
Those are flawless welds.
Radiographic inspection revealed non-metallic inclusions.
They turn those unfortunates into the charming, shambling zombies called servitors that you will see staggering about all over the place. Most of the machinery you use, even that console that Titus uses in the prologue, has at least a portion of a human brain at its core, doomed to keep working until it completely decays and is replaced with another. That's the Imperium, folks. Enjoy.
Payload chambered. Hazardous material detected. Further benedictions required.
So there you have it, folks. Heresy, Space Marines, and Tech Priests. Warhammer 40k is a wild and woolly place filled with all kinds of bizarre characters, but it's also a fascinating place to exist in, at least from behind the safety of a computer screen. I chose these three things to talk about to kind of ease you guys into the setting, but oh man, there is so much more I could talk about. I didn't mention who the Cadians are, for example, or what a dreadnought is, how space travel works in 40k. Oh, I didn't even tell you about the corpse starch. Hey, wait, come back. Where are you going? There's corpse starch. Sorry. Anyway, I hope this helped you make at least some sense of what's going on. If you have any questions, put them into the comments and I'll try my best to help you out. If the answer to your question is too convoluted, then I'm going to put it into the next video, of which there probably are a lot coming. 40k, as I said, it is a deep rabbit hole. So, if you got a question, throw it at me. I'll do my best to get to it. Now, someone needs me to go reboot a cogitator on deck 52, so I must be about the holy Omnissiah's business. Good luck out there, soldiers of the God Emperor. This is Magos Athicus, signing off.